From the studios of Clean Fuels Alliance America, this is the Better, Cleaner, Now podcast. Fascinating ideas and conversations in the world of biodiesel, renewable diesel, and sustainable aviation fuel. Now, here's your host, Scott Tremaine.
And welcome. Today, Clean Fuels Director of State Regulatory Affairs, Steve Dodge, is joined by Jonathan Phillips, Executive Director of Groundwork Elizabeth, to discuss how biomass-based diesel immediately improves the health and air quality of those who live in our country's most vulnerable and economically disadvantaged communities.
Jonathan, it is great to have you with us today. And for all our listeners, good morning, good day, good afternoon, whatever time of day it is, wherever you're listening to this podcast, welcome. And I'm really excited to have Jonathan with us. We have done probably now about 20 of these podcasts. And Jonathan, you are the first person that we've interviewed that is part of an environmental justice community. And we're going to talk a lot about what an environmental justice, some folks have heard the term EJ community. We're going to talk a lot about environmental justice communities, the nexus between the biomass-based diesel industry and environmental justice communities. But first, I want to welcome you. I appreciate your time and spending with us. And first of all, tell us, you are Executive Director of Groundwork Elizabeth. Please tell us what Groundwork Elizabeth is, and tell us a little bit about Elizabeth, New Jersey, which I've had the honor to visit on several occasions and meet you personally.
Well, I'd like to say first off, Steve, thank you for having me and hosting me today for this discussion. Yes, we are proud to be the first EJ community that's been interviewed for the Clean Fuels broadcast, and EJ is important. EJ stands for Environmental Justice. We are from Elizabeth, New Jersey, a northeast city, the fourth largest city in the state of New Jersey, with a population of 135,000 people in 11 square miles. So you can imagine how tight that is. I think the whole population of maybe Wyoming is maybe 700,000 people. So you stick 135,000 people into 11 square miles, and you're begging for environmental justice right away. But on top of that, we've got a very diverse community too. And EJ usually goes hand in hand with diversity and with poverty levels. So right now we've got in Elizabeth about 70% low moderate income population, about 65% Latinx, 20% African American, about 5 or 6% Asian. Speaking of 130 languages in the city of Elizabeth, and people really are suffering disproportionately from environmental concerns like air quality, but not only air quality, flooding, and also heat islands.
So tell us a little bit about the geography of Elizabeth. It's near the water. It's not far from New York City. There's a lot of industry. What does it look like? If I was flying over Elizabeth, New Jersey, describe it for me.
So if you're flying over Elizabeth, New Jersey, what you'd notice is about 90% impervious surfaces. And that means that there's no way for water to be absorbed into the system. You'll notice that we're close to a lot of industry, like not far, 22 miles from New York City, close to Newark, close to a lot of environmentally delicate places that are causing, let's say, pollution and things like that. And you would notice that there's a lot of people in a small area.
And that is not atypical of an environmental justice community, probably anywhere in the United States, right?
Not at all. In fact, you and I met at Kane University not too long ago, and you were talking about your own background in Boston, Massachusetts. And yeah, that's similar to Elizabeth in a lot of ways. Impervious surfaces, a lot of people, a lot of pollution.
Environmental justice, EJ community, is actually not a term of art. It's an official designation, officially designated by the federal government in many states, right?
That's right. And it's a problem that we have across the entire country and probably around the world.
So my experience first with the term environmental justice community, and I think you heard me tell this story, Jonathan, was probably, and I've been in the energy space for quite a few years, quite a number of decades actually, and this goes back at least 15 years ago. And there was a fairly prominent attorney, good friend who worked in the energy space in the Boston area. And he said to me, Steve, have you ever heard the term environmental justice community? And I hadn't, quite frankly. He said, just remember it because it's going to be something that is going to change our world. And that was my first recognition that, first of all, what an environmental justice community is. And second of all, really the impact that those EJ communities are having on the political landscape and the political dialogue federally and in virtually every single state. I mean, when you think about environmental justice policies now, they're not only concerned or affected by air quality issues and carbon reduction, which we're going to talk about, and the role biomass-based diesel plays in that, but also in health, state healthcare policy, transportation policy, right? I mean, it's pervasive and for good reason.
Goes across every area that you just spoke about. And I'm just going to go back to a question I think you might have asked me. What is Groundwork and what is our purpose? So we were formed in 2003. We're part of a nationwide network of Groundwork trusts who all have as their goals to build more sustainable and equitable communities. There's that EJ part, equity. So we're here for a real reason today because we're focused on getting some results for EJ communities.
So again, just to give people a sense, I don't know of a major urban area that I have been to that didn't have some section, whether it was right in the city or close to the city or in a close suburb of a city, that didn't have an area that had tremendous amount of industry, maybe an airport, maybe some parking lots for cars, maybe a warehouse with a lot of truck traffic, and probably, not probably, but likely, a major highway going through it, all subject to air pollution, correct?
You bet. And in fact, we have all those plus a little bit more. We've got a major oil refinery. We've got a number of major roadways, including the New Jersey Turnpike or Route 95, which goes all the way into Boston, of course, you know that. We've got rail lines, freight, diesel-propelled freight trains. We've got part of Newark Airport right in our city as well. So every type of transportation is here, and we've got to address those issues that the transportation are hurting.
And I forgot one key element, residences.
Of course. Well, we've got, of course, residences and impervious surfaces and things like that.
Older housing stock included.
Right.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about, before I talk about our industry and our role in helping these communities, I want to go back to Groundwork, Elizabeth. Groundwork is really a network of cities and communities throughout the country.
Yeah, that's correct. Actually, the Groundwork Network was brought into the United States in 1996. It was an idea that was actually begun in England, in the UK, called Groundwork UK. The National Park Service was noticing in the early 1990s that a lot of the visitors to national parks were older people, not youth. And they realized, looking into the future, my gosh, what's going to happen 20 years from now when those youthful people become adults and don't come to the national parks? So the National Park Service went to England. They saw this Groundwork program. They said, Groundwork in UK is actually getting people back into nature, back into their communities, solving some problems. Let's see if we can do that here in the U.S. And they imported that idea, and they actually opened up 3 Groundwork trusts. One was in Somerville, Massachusetts, not far from Boston, Steve. One was in Concord, New Hampshire, and one was in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And what began as a way of getting people into parks has now morphed into an environmental justice-based network of trusts around the entire country, sharing the goals of equity, of clean air, of clean transportation, and of really helping the community become more healthy.
And as you mentioned, I visited your facility a number of times. You have quite an extensive garden there. Tell us about that as well, about healthy living and that, how you incorporate that into the work that you do.
Our actual headquarters is behind a library called the Almora branch of the Elizabeth Public Library. We have a 1-acre site. It's called the Groundwork Elizabeth Microfarm and Environmental Center. And it's really a demonstration project. We have 50 community-based garden beds that residents can rent for a very, very inexpensive price. We have what we call an ag lab, which is a indoor place where we have classrooms for youth and for community members, where we talk about equity issues, environmental issues, and gardening. And in the farm area, we have in-ground planting. Yes, we're planting soybeans. We'll talk about that in a little while as well. But soybeans are definitely a key potential way of mitigating some of the air quality issues we have. We have 2 greenhouses. We start 15,000 seedlings in January through March, and we give those out to different community gardeners across Union County. And we are part of a county which is just as densely populated as Elizabeth is. There's about 578,000 people in Union County, and they all suffer from environmental justice issues as well. So yeah, gardening is an important part. Food, clean air, I mean, it all goes together.
So when you say, Jonathan, they suffer, tell us what that means. Health, asthma?
Overburdened by air pollution, overburdened by heat islands. For example, it's 5 to 7 degrees hotter in an urban community than it is in a rural community. There's a lot more flooding. We actually had a situation, unfortunately, during Hurricane Ida in 2021, where parts of the Elizabeth River tributary overflowed their banks and found people at sub-level housing. And actually, we lost 4 people. They were underwater, couldn't get out in time. We had 10 inches of rain in just a few moments, like less than an hour, and people were caught off guard. Plus the air pollution, of course. We're right near New York City, all the different transportation modes we talked about.
How do you alleviate that? Now, we're going to talk about biomass-based diesel in a minute, but what's your action plan? Is it lobbying legislators, regulators, engaging other stakeholders, getting the community more actively involved, all of the above?
At Groundwork Elizabeth, we're kind of practical about energy, and we realize that I know there's a big push towards electrification of everything we have, every mode of transportation. But in terms of reality, it's in terms of putting things. You don't want to put everything in one basket, at least not right away, not until the technology is totally there. So we are definitely looking at ways to use other types of fuels, cleaner fuels, in vehicles that are already using not so clean fuels to actually get the air clean now.
And that's where biomass-based diesel comes in. Tell us a little bit what you've been doing with clean fuels and other groups as well to kind of push the needle to educate regulators and stakeholders and legislators. And you have a passionate mayor. We've met him before. He's wonderful. To try to convince them that electrification is really, really, really important, but it can't be the only pathway because we can't electrify semis and buses and trucks by next week, right?
Yep. Well, the way we got here was first getting the community aware of the situation. What we have right now in Elizabeth is a lot of diesel pollution still. So what we had is trucks cutting right down the street in front of my office, saving some money on tolls for the turnpike, and actually polluting our local neighborhoods, and also, unfortunately, causing traffic fatalities. So what happened was we, with Rutgers and Kean University and other community partners, we started doing air quality sensing and testing. And with the diesel particulate data in hand, we went to our local government, like you said, our Mayor J. Christian Bolwaj, legislators like City Councilman Manny Grova, 20th Legislative District Assemblywoman Annette Quijano, and community members. And we put our heads together and said, this can't happen. We've got to do something about this. So we actually got some legislation passed that kept those trucks off the road.
So when you pass legislation, whether it's a local ordinance or a state law or regulation, you really need to reach beyond your local community representatives. Have you been successful in doing that? Obviously you have, but tell us a little bit about that. For the folks that are maybe downstate New York and Cape May, where they don't have the same issues. I mean, New Jersey, the same issues that you do. Have you been able to convince them that we've got some real issues back here that affect everybody, but disproportionately affect our backyard?
For certain, we are in touch with policymakers, starting locally. Of course, you always want to start locally because that's who we are. Start locally with our mayor and our city council. But we've also reached out to members of Congress, and they know us pretty well. Representative Rob Menendez is our congressman. He's been visiting with us a number of times on our work with tree planting and tree canopies. We can talk about that a little bit later, too. Senator Cory Booker visited us last August, and he's excited about the work that our youth have in working with Groundwork and with the policymakers on possible ways that we can improve our air and our environment.
Jonathan, we talked about engagement with federal and state officials. You've had some actual engagement recently with EPA, right? Environmental Protection Agency?
So federal agencies and federal legislators are so important. Besides having Cory Booker come to Elizabeth to meet with our youth, in February, we were invited to an EPA Region 2 conference regarding environmental injustice. And we went there and we presented about the heat issues, the air quality issues, and the flooding issues at this conference, and talked about some biofuels as potential for mitigating these challenges.
Were they listening?
They're definitely listening, yeah. In fact, the Port Authority was there as well and is definitely has an ear to what we want to do. And I think they definitely want to be practical. They know that they're in neighborhoods and they need to get cleaner transportation.
You're listening to the Better, Cleaner, Now podcast.
And we are speaking with Jonathan Phillips, who is Executive Director of Groundwork Elizabeth. Jonathan, tell us, what have you seen with biomass-based diesel? How have we moved the needle in reducing carbon emissions, particulate matter, all the bad stuff in fossil diesel? How is it working for you?
It's still a challenge here, Steve, actually, because there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of people to be educated about this. And what we've got to do is get this biofuel into the trucks, into those vehicles, trucks, trains, boats, anything we can that is burning fuels and putting diesel 2.5 particulates into the air. For those listeners that may not know, diesel 2.5 particulates are very small particulates. These are the ones that get into your lungs and stay there. So by using biofuels, I think there's a reduction. In fact, I know you know the numbers here, Steve, but at least 75% cleaner than a regular diesel fuel. Am I right?
It can be arranged, but that's about an average, about 75%. And as you mentioned, you get the carbon reductions and also the particulate matter as well. Are you seeing progress?
Well, what's really important for us is getting the word out to the community, getting communities involved in it, getting their voices heard. We've got a climate safe resiliency task force going on right now. So once the community is involved, it goes next to the policymakers. And in the meantime, besides the policymakers, we want to get it right into the trucks because we are a port city. We're in the port of New York and New Jersey, and a lot of diesel trucks come right from Elizabeth and right from Newark. And those fleet owners have got to be aware that they can use right now biofuels right in their trucks right now and make air cleaner for all of us now, not 20 years from now.
Are you having any luck with, and I'll segregate the kind of trucking community, there's the private fleets and then there's the state vehicles. We know what's happening in New York City, which is a stone's throw away from you. Every single one of I think it's 18,000 pieces of equipment that's operated on by diesel or with a diesel engine is now off fossil diesel. Are you having any luck with government authorities as well as private fleets?
It's a challenge, Steve, but we just had a meeting with the Port Authority. We had one of those community meetings, and the sustainability director was there talking about youth. And I remember this conversation I had a while ago because the Port Authority is committed to total electrification by 2050. So we brought up the idea to them during a community meeting, to Reef and a number of people that were there from the Port Authority. They said, we're into total electrification. We don't really want to listen to biofuels. And I said, well, what are you going to do breathing between now and then? So kind of woke them up a bit. And I think their ears are perked up. And we believe we're making some progress right there.
So, Jonathan, you and I have talked a little bit about this in the past. And there's this a little bit of a give and take between environmental groups and our industry. And even though we're on the same page, we all want reduced carbon, we all want to make the air cleaner, there's this push by a lot of environmental communities to embrace electrification, as I say, by next week. And we know that's not possible. You're an environmental justice community, but you're also an environmental organization that kind of gets it. And we've been working together, as we have with other groups, other coalitions, for a number of years. Is that pushback with some of these environmental communities just because they don't, I don't want to be critical of them, but they just don't quite understand that, yeah, you got to breathe between now and you can fully electrify everything, which could be decades and decades away?
Well, there's a certain passion in the environmental communities, like you said, that we've got to get things done like immediately. But I think the way that Groundwork Elizabeth is different is we're trying to be practical about things as well. We know industry is going to continue. We know trucks are going to continue to deliver equipment and products to communities, local communities, and across the country. And we've got to actually attack the problem realistically. So, yeah, electrification could happen. Maybe it'll be 100% one day. I don't really even think it will be. I think there's got to be other modes of fuels available. But in the meantime, we've got to make sure that what we can do, and we can have some results.
And again, you're pushing for other modes that are low carbon intensity as well, right? Electrification in smaller vehicles?
Yeah, in fact, we got a few school buses, total electric school buses, and how actually the diesel fumes in a school bus are worse inside the bus than outside. So we've got 10, it was a federal grant, and we got 10 electric school buses in Elizabeth. That's a start. But in the meantime, we have probably 98% that are not electric. And if they're using fuels that are not clean, that's silly. I mean, let's get them to use something that's cleaner.
All right, let's talk about these soy plants you've got in your backyard.
Yeah, soy. So I love the soybean farmers. We actually are have a great relationship with the United Soybean Board. I want to be really upfront about that. They've visited, and some of the members of the USB, Donald Hagen, I think you know him pretty well. He's been in Elizabeth at least twice, actually. And he brought with him members of the Soybean Board and some of my favorite people in the world. Talk about realistic people, the soy farmers from the Midwest. And they would come into Elizabeth and to Duquesne University and really understand sort of a little bit more what environmental justice is about, because of our 11,000 people per square mile versus 11,000 people in maybe an entire county. So we've had a great relationship with the soy farmers and with the Soybean Board. And part of our intent was not only to just talk to them about soybeans, to actually plant them in our micro farm, plant them at the 125 to 150 community gardens throughout Union County. So we're on the way to doing that right now, Steve.
That's great. I was actually at a couple of those meetings, and I always like to look at the audience and see how they're reacting. And you had their rapt attention because, as you said, for someone from the Midwest, in the urban areas where you and I are from, we're more familiar with the term environmental justice and environmental justice communities and disenfranchised communities. Not so much in the Midwest because there just aren't as many, and there aren't as many urban areas. And that effort is going to continue with clean fuels and other groups, right? More education, more outreach, more connecting the dots.
Yeah, hopefully we're an intelligent country and we have ears. You have to listen before you can do something. And as my father-in-law said, can't learn anything by talking. So you've got to do a lot of listening first.
Especially the father-in-laws. That's really important. I've learned that over the years. Tell us what else is going on in your world as far as Groundwork Elizabeth and what's in the agenda and what's coming up. What are some of the events you have planned?
Well, we're dealing with, obviously, a cleaner, more friendly and more equitable and healthier environment. And in line with that, we had a Tour de Elizabeth. It's our 21st bicycle tour. It's a 15-mile tour where we actually get people to ride a bike around the city of Elizabeth. They're escorted by the police department. We have hundreds and hundreds of riders. It was a beautiful day, and this is our 21st. What it does is it allows people to get some exercise, but it also demonstrates the diversity that we have in the city, the economic opportunity, and also the challenges, the air quality challenges. They're driving not too far from all these major roadways that we see as well. So as they're enjoying some really cool things, they're seeing, hey, things have to be done as well.
So we're back at these microphones 5 years from now. I hope we see you and talk to you before that. But in 5 years from now, this may be a tough question to answer. And we all know that government policies sometimes work at 3 speeds, slow, slow, and imperceptible. But 5 years from now, what would you like to be seeing? What's your goal 5 years from now as far as the quality of life, the quality of the air? What would you like to see in your community?
Well, what we say at Groundwork is everybody has the right to breathe clean air, to drink healthy water, and to have a cool environment to live in. So we'd like to see those 3 things happen. I think biofuels are part of the solution to make those things happen. They're going to be helping people breathe cleaner air for sure.
And residents of these communities, are they engaged?
So we've got a climate safe task force that we're building. We've got about 25 people. A lot of youth from the climate safe task force come from public housing, and they're really affected more disproportionately than just about anybody else because local public housing is usually in the hotter places and in the more polluted places in the city. So community members really have got to be involved in this, and we're continuing to do that.
And we get a few minutes left. I'll just ask you about the heating side. We've talked a lot about transportation, reducing diesel emissions and carbon from transportation fuel, all the trucks and the airplanes and the boats and the locomotives that are in your community and many environmental justice communities. In the Northeast, we're a big user of heating oil. Are you seeing more bioheat applications, more bioheat being used in the residents and the houses in your community?
That's a good question. I can just tell you how we're addressing the heat issue, Steve, by planting trees. And what's been interesting and really novel to Elizabeth is something called a microforest. In a small area, because we are so densely populated and have so much impervious surfaces, we can build a small forest. And this was put together by a Japanese botanist by the name of Miyawaki. And what we're doing is building microforests around the city of Elizabeth, which put 200 plants in an area of 2 parking spaces. And they compete, and within 10 years, they will absorb as much carbon and absorb heat as a 50-year-old regular forest.
Jonathan, it has been great to have you with us. I hope to have you back here on the podcast, and I hope our paths cross again, as they have several times over the past couple of years. Good luck with your mission, and good luck with the work you do. And we appreciate the work that we've done together, Groundwork Elizabeth and Clean Fuels Alliance. I hope that continues for the future.
Thank you, Steve. We're very happy to be part of this clean fuels effort, and we've got to put our heads together to continue to make this happen.
All right. Thanks, Jonathan.
All right. Thanks, Steve. Jonathan, that's it for this week's episode. If you enjoy the show and you have a moment, you can give us a rating. It helps the show grow, and we appreciate that. And if you really want to go for it, just leave us a review. We might just read it here. So please do that wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you have a question for our experts or a suggestion for a future topic or guest, you can email us at podcasts@cleanfuels.org. And join us next week for another episode of the Better, Cleaner Now podcast.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. To catch all the latest from Clean Fuels Alliance America, follow us at cleanfuels.org. The Better, Cleaner Now podcast is a production of Clean Fuels Alliance America. That's all for us. Now it's your turn to be better, cleaner now.